Have you ever wondered what happens to a train after it arrives at its destination? I know I have. It gets broken up and all the cars in the train get sent to their respective destinations on subsequent trains. But how does it happen? In this video, you can follow along as I take the train into the Balmer Yard in Seattle, Washington on my HO scale railroad and break the train down. It won't be quick, but if you're a rail fan, it might be fun. As you can see, the first step was to get the train off the main line and into the arrival departure part of the Interbay yard. In this case, our train is pulled into the B track, which is one of 3 tracks adjacent to the main line that are used for receiving and departing trains. This train is a transfer from the Stacy Street yard, which is in the southern part of downtown Seattle. Here we can see it approaching the Dravis Street overpass as it slowly enters the yard. The train seems to be made up almost entirely of cement-covered hoppers, which is the case because the Lone Star Local recently worked its way back into Stacy Street from South Seattle with a bunch of loaded hoppers to be shipped all across the region. Here the train is pulling up to the north end of the yard where we'll be working. On the left is the car repair shop. In the middle, in the top, you can see the engine terminal. And over on the right is some industrial buildings. And of course, in the center, you can see the classification bowl, as it's sometimes called. This, on the prototype, used to be a hump yard, but for the modeling purposes, I just have it as a flat switching yard. You can hear the engineer spooling down and braking the train to a stop, and soon he'll get rid of that annoying bell sound and give us a short toot to announce to everyone that the train has stopped. Before we proceed to break up the train, I want to take you on a brief tour of some of the tools we'll be using. On the left you can see the caboose track where the caboose will end up, and then we see the engine facility where the engine will end up. Here we have the GP switcher that we'll use for the work. And here coming up on the front of the layout are the car card boxes that we'll use to sort the cars by their destination, which are shown in colors. Let's pause for a second and look at how the yard tracks are used. On the left you can see we have the arrival departure tracks A, B, and C, followed by the yard tracks 0 through 6. The yardmaster uses this erasable board to keep track of which tracks are being used for which destination. I also use colored waybill tabs in each car card so that you can quickly see which direction the car is going. In this case, we have track 1 being used for southbound cars in red, track 2, northbound transfer to Everett, track 3 is northbound to Vancouver, and I've got the C track, departure track already set up for the eastbound departures to Spokane and Minneapolis. Tracks 4, 5, and 6 are used for locals that are based in Interbay, the Sky Local, the Ballard Local, and Interbay Industries in the general vicinity of the yard. So back to our tour of the yard. You can see we're going to be putting the car cards for each car in our train into the respective pocket that their waybill indicates, and I'll be showing you that as we move along. Now here coming into view is the color schematic of the entire railroad, and you can see that black dot in the center. That's the Balmer Yard, also called Interbay, where we'll be breaking down our train. Now you can see that there are warm red and yellow colors to the south, and green and blue and purple colors to the north and east. And this is how we'll be able to keep track of which color-coded waybill goes into what track. On the lower right, you see the scale house, and then this is a general view of the south end of the yard. I'm looking at the south ladder, the Pier 9091 auto rack facility, and downtown Seattle skyline. So now that we're organized, let's get to work breaking down this train. First thing is to uncouple the locomotives. Our locomotives are pulling ahead and going over to the Interbay engine facility on the right-hand side of the picture. This move is all within yard limits, so they can just take the main there and cross over to the other side. In our operating sessions, this job is normally done by the engineer that brought the train in, but if we have enough people, the hostler can take over for the road engineer, and we can assign the road engineer to a different job. This Burlington Northern layout is set in about 1973, so you can see in the engine terminal we have both newly painted Burlington Northern locomotives as well as legacy locomotives from the Great Northern, CB&Q, SP&S, and Northern Pacific. You can notice me relining the turnout for the main track in the background. That's the most common error that we make when we're operating model railroads, is to fail to align the switch for the main line after we've used it. Well, now we're finally ready to start drilling the train that we brought into the B track. You notice I used the term drilling, but you also could say spreading the train into all the tracks. To recap what we're looking at, on our left you see the ballasted main line, followed by the A track, the B track where our train of cement hoppers is sitting, the C track, which also connects to the zero track, and then what's called the yard ladder, which is tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. And we'll be shoving cars into all of these tracks as we proceed to read the waybills. The prototype yard had only the A and B track for arrivals and departures, but for a model yard I had so many trains coming and going I decided to add a C track to smooth things out for the yardmaster. Our first move will be to drop off the caboose where it stands so that we can classify all the rest of the cars on the train. We'll put the caboose away later. In a real ops session, there might be a second switcher who would come and pick the caboose off the end of the train and put it away. But in our case, we'll just leave it out on the B track until we're finished with the rest of the work. We came into town with a packet of car cards, waybills, and locomotive cards. So the first thing we want to do is separate the locomotive cards, which we've just put away in the engine panel, and then assess what we have in the train, get the car cards in the right order, and start putting them in the track that they belong. You can see the last card is a caboose card. And we can put that back on the B track pocket until we're ready to move the caboose to the caboose track. It looks like the waybill for our first car has us going to Interbay, which is on track 6, all the way to the right-hand side. This is as good as time of any to admire the caboose sitting on the B track, waiting to be put away. This is caboose number BN 11262, which was converted in the 40s by the Northern Pacific from a boxcar built in 1903. And it lasted all the way until the merger. It was only used in yard service after the merger, so I call going between Stacy and Interbay within Seattle yard service. Our next two cars are headed east. This is the purple direction. And we already have a stack of cars on the C track being made up to head east, so we'll just stick these last two cars on that track, right up against that high cube forest green NP boxcar. Technically, I don't know if a prototype railroad would have shoved cars onto an arrival departure track when they were in the middle of drilling like we are, but this is a model railroad. And my C track is really a combined arrival departure track and classification track that can be used for both purposes depending on what the yardmaster needs. It looks like our next car is heading south, and we're using right now track 1 for those cars, so we'll plop it in there. Our next car is going to Ballard, which is nearby Interbay, and therefore it's a local industry. So we'll be shoving it all the way back on that track 5 and 6 complex on the far right corner. Oh, now we have another single car going east, so we'll shove that back on the C track. This is a good time to enjoy the weathering on these cement cars. I did this using real cement applied over wet dull coat, just painted on with a paintbrush. Well, we lucked out with 2 in a row again, headed southbound, which again is track 1. Now it appears we have an eastbound purple, so that will go back on the C track. Our next car is a local industry car, so that will go back out on the upper right-hand side. You can see this process is not fast, but it is fun, and it looks like we're down to only 5 cars left in our train to classify. Now we have a car billed from Marysville, which is in the Everett area, and that's being made up in a local transfer to the Everett Bayside Yard, which is on track 2. I set up my locomotives with the braking function mapped to F9, and this allows me to have the throttle set at a low speed and then use the brake to simply stop and reverse and then release the brake, and the locomotive will come back in the other direction. It's very slick for yard work like this. Now we got lucky and all three of the last cars are headed east, so we're practically done. This HO scale model railroad yard has been in continuous operation just like we did today since I built it in about 1987. As we'll see in a minute, this C track is getting pretty full up with eastbound cars. So the next thing we'll do in a subsequent video is talk about how we make that cut into a train and send it off towards the east. We'll call that one part 2. Well, all we've got left to do now is put away the caboose. As you can see, this will involve a double switchback maneuver. I've been having so much fun operating this for the last 35 years that I've never gotten around to putting ballast in this section. That bare cork has been there for all these years. I set up the lighting in this scene so that the halogen track lights are all pointing from the south, and this causes this shot to be backlit just as it would be on the prototype Nickerson Street Bridge where this rail fanning would be done. I suppose I could set up other kinds of lights to improve it, but I kind of like having it look like it does in real life. If you're ever in the Seattle area and want to do some rail fanning, be sure to check out the Interbay Balmer Yard in between the neighborhoods of Queen Anne and Magnolia, where they're both the Gravis Street overpass and the Nickerson Street overpass, and they're just spectacular rail fanning spots. I spent a lot of time watching trains from those two bridges over the years, and that's what inspired me to build this entire layout. A little bell ringing to make sure they know we're coming. This GP9 we've been using as a switcher is an Athearn Genesis unit with a Tsunami 2 sound decoder. So that's what happens to a train when it arrives at its final destination. Put away the engines, put away the caboose, and classify all the cars into the right track for their next destination. Now that we're done with our assignment, let's just take one more look at the yard. You can see on the C-track, we've got a lot of our cars ready to go eastbound, be made up into a train. And we've put the waybills for our cars into their various boxes. The C-track, track 1 for southbound cars, track 2 for local northbound cars, track 5 and 6 for our local industries. All of these cars will eventually make their way onto departing trains, and we'll cover that in part 2 of this video series. In the meantime, don't hesitate to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications of future videos, and you can watch the past videos. Thank you very much for joining me.